loading it. Alright guys, here it is, the latest auction gamble. And we have really rolled the dice on this one, or another one. It is a sight unseen excavator purchase. So I can't really be upset, because I never went and looked at it. Although I might be upset. Lights busted out. Just noticed that, but haven't had it here long. I had it shipped up here. A guy dropped it off. I'll show that video will show. And then I've just basically moved it around a little bit, backed it into the shop, and here it sits. And it's been a couple days, had kids' sports and stuff keeping me busy, so I haven't really got out here to look at it. I did know that it came with an auto lube system, aka a hydraulic leak. So we'll have to get that fixed. I think it's in the pilot hoses, so I'm not super worried. It doesn't like spew, but definitely drips. The final drives, nothing looks crazy. It tracks well. It runs well. The starter doesn't engage with the control panel. You have to jump the starter with a screwdriver, but it fires right up. No leaks from the finals. Nothing crazy anywhere. So it is a 341, as you can probably see in the video. It's a 2006 G model with 4,800 hours on it, I believe. They've done a number on the bucket. The cutting edge has seen better days. The hold down, the tie down ears have seen better days, both of them. Folded in. So I believe this was at a county, and they're obviously hard on stuff. I spent some time just a little bit ago working on this thing to get the door to unlatch. Still a little sticky, but good and tight. The cab looks pretty good. This thing here, it's pretty floppy. You can see it flops that joystick around something awful. So I need to get that cleaned up, or need to get a sleeve in that thing or something. The other joystick works pretty well. Most all the glass is in it. So it does have AC. It looks like the AC might have been charged. I haven't tried it. Doesn't really matter because the front window's gone. I think they busted that out when they had an accident, I believe. So something came back and got them. See if I can stand on a non-approved step here. So this is busted out. You notice this is nice and flat right here. Come across. Oh, there's a dent and a divot right here. So I'm going to have to figure out a way to pull this thing back out this way. Probably didn't show good on camera, but something came down, whacked the top of the cab, busted this glass and busted this glass. Of course, I saw that in the auction pictures. Not too worried. I think I will just replace it with some plexiglass at some point. And if I get that far, it's still got a lot better cab than what the 331 has on it. So even if I'm in there, I can blow heat and it would at least be decent in the cold. And similar to my skid steer sitting outside this wall, it's got the sides and the back, but the front door is missing. So it's not actually horrible in the winter with the heat cranked up. So that's that. I will show you what my main concern with it is here going forward. So here's where the gamble comes in. This thing also doesn't like to shut. It could use some adjustment. Like I said, the starter's got to be jumped. Before you even go that far, it's a good idea to check the oil. Of course, I keep dropping things here the past 2 days. They slip out of my hands. So I go to check the oil, and voila, It is all the way to the top, nearly coming out of the dipstick hole. So this thing's got like 3 times too much oil in it. Again, auctions are a gamble, and this is the perfect example. Nothing ever mentioned about that. It starts up and runs good. It does not smoke excessively. I'm shocked, truthfully, but we're gonna drain out some oil. I think I've got an old oil container here that I'll probably drain some of it into. I'll drain some of it into a bucket, and if I drain too much out, I might put a little back in just in case. Because I don't really want to spend a bunch of oil if this thing's got some other major problem. The coolant is good. The hydraulic oil looks a little low. Not bad, which it is got a leak, so I'm not too worried about that. The coolant's topped off. Engine oil scares me, but we'll go from there. Okay, we're still draining. The hose is like right in the way. Getting closer. Getting close. Still got a ways to go. I'm gonna drain her down until she's about right. And then we might fire it up and see if she starts building oil back in there. Hoping it's not diesel fuel coming in. But, so on the floppy controller, I've been working on that. Get 2 hands here. So you see this back here, this is what, it just rides on that little pin. And then there's that little notch that locks in there. Lift the lever. Here, so lift the lever, and it disengages and comes up. I need to make that pin a bigger diameter. Let's see if we can take this thing apart. Alright guys, we drained out a lot of oil there. At least 1/3 of a 5-gallon bucket. It's got us right where we need to be on the stick. Right at the top. I wouldn't say where we need to be, but I'd rather err on the high side. It should be up above the level of the pan still. So we'll fire her up. I wasn't able to get that free yet. That's going to take a minute. Get my stuff out of the way. Let's see here, put in my code. There we are, we're alive, 4,926 hours. Hit the start button, nothing happens. But that does kick in the relay for the fuel pump. Screwdriver, that's my good one too. Pressure would be right there. Got a tick. right, guys, here we are. We're back on the Bobcat again. I think I've got another video where I showed you that I bought it and I started working on it. And then this thing it has been sitting for almost the last month. We put in a pool out in the yard, and I used the other Bobcat to dig it. So I'll use the 331 on that one. So you'll see some video from that. And this pretty well just sat for the last month. And it's just been taking up room in the shop. I need to get it out of here. So you get hydraulic fluid all over the floor. So the big problem was one of the pilot hoses coming through this joystick was leaking real bad. This joystick, you're always doing this. You're always bending the hoses, rubbing them against the back here. So it finally had an issue. I couldn't even tell which hose it was. They were all kind of weeping fluid. So I decided, all right, you basically have to disassemble the entire cab. So I decided I'm going to replace one, I'm going to replace them all, which you know is going to be pricey, but with this much work involved, it's easier to do it. Let's see here. Got my thing here hanging from the floor, or hanging from the ceiling. I don't know if you guys can even see that. I have to get a light. Use my phone light. So to plug off the valve, actually these little, I think 3/16 size fittings, I use golf tees to plug the holes. Instead of, I didn't have enough, didn't have any caps and plugs for that size. So actually golf tees work real well plugging those holes. So just a little tip. I've got $300 in new hose sitting here. So this should be every hose I need to do the joystick, and then a hose over on the valve bank over there was weeping real bad too. You can definitely see these are 1/4 inch, I guess they're 1/4 inch, 5800 PSI hoses. And the factory pilot hoses were not rated that high. The factory pilot hoses were 500. Gates connected M500 1/4 inch. Flame resistant. They're definitely more flexible. I don't think that's going to be too big of a problem, but I actually just dropped the hoses off, came back to pick them up, and they had used all of this normal 5800 PSI hose. So it is going to be stiffer, but hopefully it'll last just as long or longer. But it might make the joystick or that console a little tougher to move up and down. We'll just have to see. Let's see. Yeah, that's pretty well it. I'll do some time lapse of me putting this thing together and show you. I can sort of talk through it real quick. There's only a couple hoses come down to this valve down here. A couple hoses go up over to the pattern selector. Got the pattern selector valve over there. I think only 2 hoses go to it. I think pilot and tank hoses from the joystick come down to here. Maybe. And then, let's see here. Yeah, and then 2 hoses come over. There's only 6. 2, 2, and 2. So 2 hoses come over to here. One comes in way down here, and then one comes in right up here. So I'll do those first. All right, guys. See right here, we got us a new set of hoses. These are non-conductive hoses. So they are very flexible, and they are the same diameter as the pilot hoses that came off of it. They are 4,000 PSI rated. The pilot hoses are 500. So over the weekend, and I took a little video. I tried to get this thing to work, but it's just these hoses are not going to work. And I'll pull this cover back off. It's got the cover pushed way up. It doesn't even want to move all the way up. Run into that. And there's two hoses right back here. They're rubbing real bad. I've already chafed the edge of one of them real bad. So they're just too big to really fit. So I got to pull it all back out, swap new hoses in. So a little bit of aggravation. All right, guys, I'm about 2 hours in. I got everything hosed up, unhosed and then rehosed. So I will sort of walk you through. So I got my pilot hose there connected. I got a tank hose there I still have to connect, and some other tank and pilot hoses, and hose number 1. I got them all labeled. So I was able to pull those off. I really only need to probably pull that one. I could have lifted this whole thing up. I pulled off more than I needed to in actuality, but so this thing is basically labeled, and let's see, maybe you can see you get T1, P, and 4 are visible. Put my phone down. So you got tank number 1, pilot is in the middle, 4 is over here on the end, 3 is at the very back, and 2 is over here on this inside back side. So your pilot will go there, your tank will go down on the bottom. Let me see here. I've got a little diagram of everything. All right, 1. So if I climb up in here real quick. So 1 is the yellow or orange hose going closest to the cab. So there we go. All right, 1 is the closest to the front of the cab. 3 is the orange hose closest to the rear of the cab there. And then let's see here. So let's see. Number 4 comes in at the top of the main valve right here. And number 2, I don't know if I can show you number 2 real well. Number 2 comes down there at the bottom of the main valve. And then it's got another hose. I actually replaced it too. It comes over here with this little valve block. There's a T fitting right there. So those are all the hoses on the pilot or left-hand joystick that go into all the different valves. So you guys won't have to figure that out on your own if you ever have to do this. These so these are fiberglass hose with some kind of plastic core. So I'll turn my flashlight off on my phone real quick here. There we go. All right. So this orange hose, it's fiberglass with like some kind of plastic core. It's for non-conductive for like our bucket truck, because our bucket truck's insulated for working around high voltage lines. So that orange line, that's what that's actually designed for, is for non-conductive, but it's high pressure, 4,000 psi, but it is a lot more flexible than a standard rubber hose that has a steel core wound. Like this has like a steel or a stainless steel inner core, or it's a rubber inner core with a stainless steel or a steel sheath wrapped around it. It makes them real rigid. And let's see here. You can also maybe see here, they are a fair amount larger. You wouldn't think, I didn't think that little bit larger made that big of a difference, but it really did when you have to snake 4 up through the inner portion, 2 go over the very back in this joystick. It really made it. I couldn't get this clamp in place. I couldn't get the covers on. Let's see here. One of these hoses was already rubbing pretty bad. That's just dirt. Let's see, I think one of them already had a pretty good little cut. Yep, this one right here. So this one right here already had a pretty good little cut spot in it. And you can actually see it pushed it down to the steel core right there, or the steel winding. So I am going to take those hoses back to the hydraulic shop. Like that one right there, they can just cut it right there, because most people probably won't use these goofy 45 ends. So they can still salvage a good bit of the hose and keep the straight ends on them. So they'll be able to salvage a little bit out of that, and I'll probably pay them something, because they are a little local shop. I do want to keep them sort of in business, I guess, and happy. They're going to try to work with me and keep me happy. I'm not going to say I'm at fault or necessarily they're at fault either. It's just sort of a, I guess, just sort of a misunderstanding of I didn't realize they didn't make low pressure hydraulic hose, or didn't have any low pressure pilot hose, and that I didn't realize they were going to make them out of standard pressure hose. And I didn't really realize this stuff was as flexible as it is and as small as it is. And I think this is only like 40 cents more expensive per foot than this hose, so it doesn't add up to be crazy expensive over the other stuff either. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this valve hosed out and probably call it a night. All right, guys, we're finished hosing this thing up. Everything looks real good. No leaks. I did fire it up, tested it around. At first, that joystick was solid as a rock. So I did have the tank and the pressure swapped down here. So I was actually feeding pressure into the tank side of that joystick, and it had it solid. So if that ever happens, that's probably the problem. So swap those around, everything works good. Looks like everything's pretty well leak free for the most part. At least it's not dripping leaks, so we're gonna call that a success and get the cab buttoned back up. Get this thing out of here. I'm fixing to go show you another project, which I have some parts for. All right, guys, I'm back out in the shop today for a little bit. I did actually take this machine out on a job. We were there for about 5 hours loading out brush, and it did okay. The exhaust, I think I have a previous video that talks about the exhaust was leaking. I've got the exhaust pulled off now, and even with the light and everything being black, it's hard to see in here, but got the exhaust off. It's not too difficult. Mainly pull the air filter, 2 bolts and the clamp, and then you've got the I had to pull all 4 bolts on the tube that goes over, and the reason for that is because this exhaust is fatigued out, and they clamped the crap out of that thing. It will not come back apart, but here you can see why the exhaust was leaking. It's got this huge chunk missing out of it. This is the bracket that holds it to the machine, or by the engine. You can see most of that piece of steel's there, not all of it, but a good bit of it. So I think this muffler is 350 bucks, and then there's a purifier muffler that's like 1,700 that you can also get that will fit this machine also, which I definitely wouldn't buy, but I think I'm going to go ahead and try and repair that. But back to what I was saying, we did take it out on a job. I didn't film that job. It was real tight quarters, just a lot of tracking in and out, taking stuff to the truck. It did okay. So I'd actually taken a piece of rock wool out of this heater, put it up under there, sandwiched it, and I had basically taken a piece of wire and tied that exhaust manifold up against it to hold it, to keep it from leaking, and that actually worked pretty well as a temporary fix. We got out, got to run the machine for a while. The oil didn't get much higher. It might be a tick higher though. We might have a seal leaking in here. I might just have to watch that more. If it is, it's pretty minor. Because again, we ran this thing for almost 5 hours, a lot of idle time, just sitting there, because again, the starter I have to jumper it with a screwdriver. Don't like doing that real frequent, so I've got to get a 12-volt source over to the starter. See why that's not happening. The exhaust, about 3.5, 4 hours in, the wire broke, and then the exhaust started blowing everywhere. You can see where it got exhaust soot all over these hydraulic fittings. It blows down right on this pump, so it gets the pump hot. And as the oil gets hotter and hotter, you can definitely tell the machine gets a little weaker, thinner oil. You're gonna have lower pressures. That's just the way it works. So getting this fixed is definitely important. And then you don't want a bunch of hot exhaust blowing in there, heating things up. You could possibly melt some things. This hose, it definitely degrades rubber components and could possibly cause a fire, worst case. So definitely need to get the exhaust fixed. So I think I'm gonna try to weld this thing up instead of paying 300 bucks. It's gonna take a lot of welding though. You can see it is cracked all the way up to there, which I don't think will actually matter. Because I believe I am just going to cut this off. I'll probably cut it off right there. And weld this just around the perimeter of this bracket. Alright guys, I'm going to run this on a pretty low setting. See if I can't fill in some cracks that are already existing without blowing through. They're hard to see. Poke the hole. Got too hot. But we can fill that. At the end of the wire. Alright guys, that's a wrap on some pretty ugly welding. But we've got all the cracks sealed up. Except for maybe right there. I might still have a bit of a crack in the actual old exhaust. That's really ugly. There's just horrible access right there. That cover, I should have cut that cover off. That side's not as bad, and that side's doable. Definitely not a welder. Man, that's ugly, but it'll get the job done. All right, guys, here's the muffler. Got the tab welded back on, so. Let's see if I can't get this thing put back in place. Go in just like so. Let's see, I'll leave that one in place. Pull my exhaust plug. We can't get a bolt started in this thing. Here's the one started. These bolts are filthy. Alright, that's in place. Got my gasket. Alright. See if I got some anti-seize. Bolts. If you guys are doing this work, you'll definitely understand where I'm working at. It's that little flange on the back of the turbo. Definitely could be worse designs. But it ain't the most friendliest thing to get into. Wrong socket. Run it down hand tight. At least on the 3 of the 4 I can easily get to. Snug them all. Alright, so those are the 4 bolts I just put on. It runs over through there, down to here. And the exhaust is pretty well spot on where it needs to be. So I'm going to tighten that up. And then we're pretty well good to go. Put the air cleaner back on and be done. Alright guys, I've been trying to get this thing to start on its own. It just won't. I keep jumpering with a screwdriver across here. For whatever reason, the relay is not bad. I can put the relay into other positions. It works just fine. I put these relays. This is the starter. I'll show you So the starter is the far right relay. I've taken switch, fuel pull, lights, glow plug. I've swapped all the relays around. None of them work over here. So for whatever reason, this is the 2 on the side is what energizes the relay. That goes across the coil of the relay. That should pull the relay in. Not getting power there. This is positive all the time. This is going down to the starter. So this is the glow plug relay. And basically I get a 2203 code in there. I don't know why. I guess just because maybe something here is disconnected on the power coming to the relay. But basically, let me put the camera down for a quick second. See if it'll sit. So basically just kind of rig this. So I'm basically stealing power straight from, get down in there, straight from the glow plug. So anytime that glow plug relay kicks on, it's going to try to start the machine. And then when I do that, the 2203 code goes away. Let's see, I'll enter my code. There we go. Let's see. Hold for codes. So I get 0921, that's the fuel level. It's reading fuel level high. As you can see, the fuel it definitely doesn't have a full tank in it. So I can hit the start button and now it will start. And shut off. So everything works except there's something there, just can't energize that relay. So I'm about to figure out something. This is gonna be my temporary fix. I may just run I might just go buy a lawnmower key switch or whatever, or even some kind of push button momentary switch. Drill me a little hole, put me a push button switch. I could run that push button switch into here or down to here. Either one doesn't really matter. I just need to put a fuse on it. I need to steal 12 volts from somewhere. So I could basically run 2 wires, one from here over to a push button, and that would get it. That gets me my 12 volts and my switched coming down to here. So might end up doing that and just bypassing this relay altogether. There's not a lot of current to pull in this solenoid. If it was actually running a starter, that's a whole nother story. But it would definitely still need to be fused though. So. Alright guys, hope you enjoyed the video. That's pretty well going to wrap this thing up. I'm probably going to fire it up and get it out of here.